We know what we saw. We know what we heard. It wasn't spontaneous. They came prepared for battle. Body armor, chemical weapons, zip ties. Their mission, to overturn an American election.
We will never concede.
Outnumbered, brave law enforcement officers fought hand-to-hand to save our democracy. Many were wounded. One died the next day. Post-traumatic stress syndrome drove 4 January 6th heroes to suicide. Donald Trump calls this violent terrorism a day of love.
That was a day of love.
He's promised to pardon these violent criminals. That's wrong. Evil.
Those people have suffered long and hard. And I think it's very unfair.
Don't let one man rewrite history. We know what we saw. We know what we heard. There are no alternative facts. Only the truth.
Welcome to ViperTV Live. How's it going out there in Radio Land? Good to see everybody. So, tell me that commercial wasn't about fucking accurate. Especially with the current occupation of DC right now. I'm consistently seeing this rewrite of history, and it's making me absolutely insane. What do I mean by that? I'll tell you what I mean by that. Well, it seems that history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that, well, there's a damn good chance that what is considered our American Reichstag fire, the beatdown of big balls, sad as that is, was a good chance that, like many other authoritarians, this was a planned act in order to gain power. What do I mean by that? Well, it's pretty fucking simple. You see, all you have to do is follow the facts. And luckily, we have Anonymous out there. And I like this clip because it really, really does kind of prove just how much bullshit this really is. Like I said, I would have never thought that the experiment of American democracy would end with the beatdown of big balls. And it's funny to say, but it's like all you can do is laugh to keep from crying. You know what I fucking mean? Like, also, enough of the gaslighting when it comes to this whole, like, Putin is going to meet up and actually, in good faith, you know, like, talk with Trump about ending Ukraine. Basically, the slow and skinny of it is that, like, there's a dangerous loophole to the heart of the Trump-Alaska meeting. Like, when Trump sits down with Putin in Alaska on the 15th, the headlines are going to focus on peace talks over Ukraine, but the real danger isn't in what might be agreed. It's in how little stands in the way of what Trump could give away. Because the United States has never formally declared war on Russia. So Trump can enter that room without the legal constraints that normally apply in wartime. And that means no automatic congressional oversight, no binding war power triggers, and no requirement to treat any intelligence sharing as a statutory violation. That's right. A sitting president has near total discretion to declassify and disclose. Did you know that? Especially in this context, because that power could extend to, I don't know, NATO security plans, Ukrainian battlefield intelligence, European defense vulnerabilities, but like with zero legal recourse after the fact. And that loophole also allows Trump to frame any concessions as executive understanding rather than treaties. Is bypassing the Senate ratification entirely, really. But without Ukraine at the table with the allies sidelined, this summit risks becoming a precedent, setting an act of informal capitulation, naturally, a president trading away the security of partners and credibility of alliances in a private deal under the cover of diplomacy. and entirely within the letter, but not the spirit of the U.S. law. Like, that meeting needs to have every eye and ear on it, is all I'm saying. Let's check out this anonymous clip. Because the beatdown of big balls, I'm telling you. Right there. Take a look. For those who, like me, understand this, are we in hell? Are we? I just can't believe this. This is our Reichstag fire. This is what's going to be written in history, officially in the books. Yeah, go ahead and go ahead and chew on that for 2 seconds. The beat down of big balls. But the thing about the beat down of big balls, it's so fucking stupid to have to say. But yeah, at the same time, it's amazing. We got this amazing clip from Anonymous, actually. And they're going to go into this.
You may know us as the faceless, voiceless collective that thrives in the shadows, peeling back layers of lies and deception, shining a harsh light where others are too afraid or too compromised to look. We don't take sides with politicians. We take sides with the truth. And today, the truth hides beneath a strange, almost absurd sequence of events the media has branded the Big Balls incident. The question isn't just whether it happened the way they say it did. The real question was the chaos orchestrated? And if it was, who benefits from it? And why does it all seem to lead directly to Donald Trump's next big move? Let's rewind and start with the man at the center of this story, Edward Korestein. If you've followed certain political fringes online, you might know him better by his nickname, Big Balls. 19 years old, formerly attached to Elon Musk's experimental department of government efficiency, DOGE for short, a so-called Wunderkind, who despite his age had already held short-term roles in agencies like USAID, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, TSA, and had even been assigned to projects like Gold Cards, his latest posting, working for the Social Security Administration, on their website. Yes, from flashy Musk experiments to the mundane bureaucratic trenches. On the surface, his resume looks like a curious mix of stunt.
The best part about this is that he had access to everybody's information. That's the best part. So maybe the beatdown of Big Balls was like, you know, every time we got it, you could hear like and see the rings coming out, and each one of those rings was maybe like our personal data. That's the best metaphor I can come up with, possibly.
Appointments and digital busy work, but his proximity to figures like Musk, and by extension to political insiders loyal to Trump, positioned him in an interesting space, a space where chaos could be turned into currency. Now here's where the story takes its turn. According to police reports out of Washington, D.C., in the early hours of the morning around 3 a.m., Korestein was allegedly attacked in DuPont Circle by a group of about 10 teenagers. The narrative says he was attempting to stop a carjacking, stepping in heroically to protect someone in danger. 2 suspects, both aged 15, were arrested shortly afterward, and conveniently an iPhone 16 worth about $1,000 was reported stolen. The official police line paints Korestein as an unexpected Good Samaritan blindsided by urban violence. But what happened next was far more revealing than the attack itself. Photos started circulating online, graphic images of Korestein shirtless, blood smeared across his face and torso. The shots were taken by a friend, Marco Elez, who just happened to be there to capture the aftermath. And these weren't photos hidden in private chats. They were broadcast to the world, posted by none other than Donald Trump.
I mean, dude did fall for MS Paint being on somebody's knuckles and saying that those are real tattoos, what makes you think he's not going to fall for this, especially when he seems to have some experience with blood capsules.
Trump on his own social media platform, Truth Social, the former, and now once again president, used those bloody images as a prop to call for harsher laws, urging that juvenile suspects be tried as adults. A clear political statement wrapped around a violent urban crime story. And then Elon Musk weighed in. On X, he claimed that a group of about a dozen youths attempted to assault a woman in her car, and Coristine jumped in to save her, sustaining a traumatic brain injury.
Oh my God. How many times have you heard the I have to save the white woman from the black people trope? Like, this dates all the way back to, like, birth of a fucking nation. Like, this trope never gets old. I mean, that's the reason Emmett Till died.
In the process, but saving her life. Hero narrative ready-made, conveniently tidy. No shades of gray. Just an innocent man defending a woman and a city too dangerous for its own good. Here's where Anonymous raises its first red flag. Where's the surveillance footage? This is DuPont Circle. Washington, D.C. is riddled with cameras. You can hardly step outside without being picked up by a dozen lenses. Yet somehow there is no public video of this alleged assault. We have still photos after the fact.
Maybe that's one of the questions we need to be asking about this. Where's the footage? Where's the surveillance footage? There's cameras everywhere. Old boy was there with his phone to be able to take that photo. Where, I mean, we know that on pretty much every telephone pole there's a camera. Let's go ahead and use this 1984 fucking technology that we've implemented for, I don't know, actual good. Let's find the footage. Maybe that footage is hidden in the Epstein files. Maybe that's it.
A narrative that's been repeated by Trump and Musk. But we don't have raw, verifiable evidence of the moment itself. That's not impossible, but it's unlikely. Now let's look at the timing. Within hours of the story hitting the public, Trump issued an order sending additional federal law enforcement into D.C., framing it as a necessary response to a supposed spike in violent crime. But the data doesn't support that claim violent crime in the district is actually at a 30-year low. And that's the second red flag. The reality on the ground doesn't match the urgency of the federal action, unless the real urgency isn't about crime at all, but about political theater. Consider how Trump thrives politically. He works best when there's a crisis, real or manufactured, that allows him to step into the role of law and order savior. The Big Balls story is tailor-made for this persona. It's visceral.
Make a problem, make a solution to the problem, claim credit for making the solution to the problem. Cycle repeats itself. The Fashkant original.
It's visual. It has a sympathetic protagonist linked to Trump's own orbit, and it's easily framed too as an indictment of liberal city mismanagement.
Also, if you know anything about history, look up Horst Wessel, Horstwessel, and you'll see where the Big Balls narrative fits in with that too.
And soft on crime policies. Anonymous suspects that whether or not the attack happened exactly as described, it was quickly repurposed or even staged to serve a political goal. In this case, the goal might be twofold: to justify a heavy-handed federal presence in D.C. and to reignite Trump's broader...
I personally think not only it's to ignite a presence in D.C., but they're going to try to do it in Chicago and New York. Pretty much anywhere where there's a black governor, black mayor seems to be... He also said Oakland. Hey, imagine that. What seems to be the trend here? I'm not sure. But it does seem like this is the precedent that's going to be used for trying to invoke martial law and cancel the midterms. Because his redistricting plan, when Texas is blowing up, everybody's knowing about it, is probably going to turn on them because Democrats are definitely going to gerrymander. Like, there's no two ways around it. And if the Republicans decide not to, well, they're still fucked no matter what because the Democrats decide to gerrymander. And because you can't win that way, that means that we got to just cancel midterms in general because, you can't win unless you cheat, right? It's all so blatantly obvious.
Law and order narrative heading into whatever his next big move is. The reaction from Fox News only reinforces
Newsom's Twitter game's on point.
Leaned heavily into martyrdom imagery, turning Korestein into a symbol of conservative victim.
That whole, right there, exactly what he said, martyrdom imagery and turning him into a symbol of conservative victimhood. Everything about the story plays into their dogma. 100%. They just enforce and pound down the law when it suits them, and when it doesn't, they just ignore it. So we need to be calling that out, because this whole being able to claim power by planned victimhood, no, that shit ain't gonna fly for 2 seconds.
Hood, a young patriot beaten down in the liberal heart of the capital. It's the kind of framing that stirs outrage among the base and builds emotional momentum for whatever policy push comes next. But here's where the story splinters into even stranger territory. Parallel to the big balls spectacle, Trump's allies in media are promoting voices like Pete Hegseth, who, in a separate but thematically linked controversy, posted a CNN interview with Pastor Doug Wilson. Wilson is not shy about his views opposing women's suffrage, supporting the criminalization of gay sex, defending certain aspects of slavery, and openly advocating for a future Christian theocracy. Hegseth shared this without condemnation, implicitly endorsing it, and when asked for comment, a Pentagon spokesperson confirmed that Hegseth, in his role as Defense Secretary, very much appreciates Wilson's writings and teachings. Why mention this in the same breath as the Big Balls incident? Because it paints a picture of the ideological ecosystem we're dealing with. This isn't just about one street-level assault. It's about the kind of America these players are trying to create. An America governed by fear, dominated by a narrow religious vision, and policed with authoritarian fervor. The chaos on the street becomes the justification for the crackdown, and the crackdown becomes the tool for reshaping the country. And there's more. In the background of all this domestic theater is an international subplot. Reports that Vladimir Putin is set to visit Alaska for a summit with Trump on August 15th. No other Western leader has hosted Putin since the war in Ukraine began. The symbolism is staggering. A pariah leader welcomed onto U.S. soil.
Oh, yeah, and don't forget that in that press conference that Trump said he was meeting with Putin in Russia. Now, either he's planning to give Alaska to Putin, or his brain is mashed potatoes and the 25th Amendment needs to be invoked because he thinks Alaska is Russia. It's one of the two.
Potentially to negotiate the handover of parts of Ukraine. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton has already called this a great victory for Putin and compared it to the disastrous optics of inviting the Taliban to Camp David.
You were in the room in 2018 in Helsinki when this happened. What do you make of the fact that Putin has now been invited to Alaska?
Well, it's very gracious of Putin to come to former Russian America for this summit. This is not quite as bad as Trump inviting the Taliban to Camp David to talk about the peace negotiations in Afghanistan.
Oh, don't forget about not just inviting the Taliban to Camp David, but he also released 5,000 Taliban that ended up taking over Afghanistan, that ended up making it so the withdrawal from Afghanistan ended up being an absolute clusterfuck, and just because it was on Joe Biden's watch, he was able to capitalize on that. It's, like I said, he fucking created the problem and then capitalized off it. Create the problem, capitalize off it. not only is it the dictator playbook, but there's also like a little hint of that Roy Cohn 101 in there.
But it certainly reminds one of that. The only better place for Putin than Alaska would be if the summit were being held in Moscow. So the initial setup, I think, is a great victory for Putin. He's a rogue leader of a pariah state, and he's going to be welcomed into the United States. Second, I have a feeling this is sliding very quickly in Russia's direction.
When you step back and connect the dots, a pattern emerges. Domestically, you manufacture, or at least amplify, chaos. You use it to justify federal muscle, to stoke cultural fear, to present yourself as the only solution. Internationally, you cozy up to a foreign strongman in ways that undermine existence.
And that whole like defend your culture thing, that's such a tired line. You know, that's actually one of the lines that they have on ICE recruitment ads. Defend your culture. Oh yeah, I wonder what that means. Probably the same thing as America First. Yeah, go ahead and Google that origin.
Existing alliances and shift the balance of power. Together, these moves strengthen an authoritarian narrative and weaken democratic norms. So where does Anonymous stand? We're not here to tell you what to believe about whether Big Balls was genuinely attacked, whether it was staged, or whether the truth lies somewhere in...
I can't deal with the fact that our political discourse has to deal with the sentence, if Big Balls was genuinely attacked. Gang. If this is our Reichstag fire, like, how do we not just throw our arms up in the air and say, fuck it, let it burn? That's what I want to know.
Between, we are here to tell you that the speed, the coordination, and the political mileage extracted from this event are too precise to ignore. We are here to remind you that powerful people have always understood the value of spectacle, and that in politics, nothing goes to waste. You have to ask yourself, why was there a photographer on hand to capture just the right images? Why did the story immediately get national coverage through Trump's own channels and Musk's social media?
These are the questions we need to be asking when the idea of bringing martial law is declared upon us. But we need to be asking these questions en masse. If you have a telephone, you can be asking questions and then posting them. But if you need to rewind, go ahead. This is the inquiry and line of inquiry that we need to be making.
Megaphone. Why was there such a swift federal response to a single street crime in a city where crime is statistically down? Why does the narrative fit so neatly into Trump's political needs? If you think these are just coincidences, history will prove you naive. If you recognize the signs of manipulation, then you know what comes next. More fear, more control, more erosion of freedoms dressed up as public safety. Anonymous belief.
And honestly, that's exactly what Bukele did in El Salvador. The Fashkent original, they follow the same playbook, and I guarantee that when Bukele came and they were talking about Garcia and talking about building more prisons and whatnot, they were sitting down and he was like, so how did you do it? How did you get to full power? You know, like, and his people were talking with Stephen Miller because, you know, like, him and Trump were just busy talking about, you know, probably how they can make even more money off of the prisoner exchange down to El Salvador, because Marco Rubio did sign a contract for $15 million of our tax dollars. Look it up.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant. That's why we're speaking on this while corporate media either won't touch it or will only skim the surface. They'll give you the sanitized version. We'll give you the raw edges, the parts that don't fit the inconsistencies they hope you won't notice. If you see what we see, if you understand how critical it is to question these narratives, then act. Share this message. Talk to people. Shine a light where they want shadows. The only way to defeat orchestrated chaos is with organized truth. The choice is yours.
That's the facts right there, gang. Because if there's one thing that is going to foil their plans, it's the truth, because sunlight is the best disinfectant. And the thing is that what they can't stand is narratives being blown apart. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, it's very, very, very simple concept here. Let me show you. Exactly. See that? MAGA on Jan 6th. Only Nancy Pelosi can deploy the National Guard. Trump today. I'm deploying the National Guard. MAGA. See, only Trump can deploy the National Guard. With 2 seconds worth of deductive reasoning, you can see that all of their arguments go to shit. Like, they have no morals, they have no principles. This is the, by the way, this is the part where you 2A bros, you were supposed to be rising up against a tyrannical government, but instead you salivate for the boots. You want 1984 so bad you can fucking taste it. And it tastes like kiwi polish. But you can't always hide the truth, especially when the truth is on record. Now, as much as they want to try to spin it away, oh, well. Every now and again, a channel like MSNBC does report something based. Now, this report is from 3 years ago, but it just so happens that kind of fits in our current narrative.
The National Guard. Well, beginning that very afternoon, the Trump White House attempted to tamp down those concerns with a big lie. Hours into the attack, Press Secretary Kelly McEnany tweeted, "At President Trump's direction, the National Guard is on the way." Not true. Just a lie. Not true. Donald Trump never directed the National Guard to go to the Capitol. Maybe she was mistaken, but in the days before on
No. See, the most important thing before we go into this is that they failed. And so that's what it boils down to. The coup failed. And because they failed, they have to blame somebody, because then there might be accountability. And one thing that they don't do is accountability. So therefore, we have to figure out how to shift blame onto somebody. It's more Roy Cohn 101.
January 6th didn't happen. That did not stop Trump himself from then lying on January 7th.
I immediately deployed the National Guard and federal law enforcement to secure the building and expel the intruders. America is and must always be a nation of law and order.
Alte Liebe kostet nicht. Bis zu 30%
Oops,
sparen.
I'm on my other account. Let me change that. That's what happens when you're going back and forth uploading stuff, and there we go.
So one of the questions that has lingered in the year and a half since the violent attack on January 6th is why the Capitol Police staff had to convince him to make that speech, the January 7th one, in the first place. And when he finally agreed, practically the first thing out of his mouth was that lie. I deploy the National Guard. It had already been debunked. The New York Times reporting on the evening of January 6th that Trump, quote, rebuffed and resisted requests to mobilize the National Guard. And in the end, it was Vice President Mike Pence who approved the order to deploy.
Now, I wonder why it was rebuffed that they shouldn't deploy the National Guard. I wonder why. I wonder why when they weren't deployed and Jan 6 went off, why then all of a sudden the narrative became that they were deployed. I wonder why.
That did not stop Trump and his allies and his staff from repeating the lie over and over again.
Even in January, that was given. As many as 10,000 National Guard troops were told to be on the ready by the Secretary of Defense. That was a direct order from President Trump.
A few weeks after that, Trump said it again in an interview on Fox News, this time trying to
make the lie big, make it easy, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. And the base will eat it up. What do I mean by that? I can't even tell you how many right-wing influencers use the narrative of January 6th with Nancy Pelosi didn't do anything to summon the guard. So that means that Nancy Pelosi has more power than the president. That's what you're saying now? So let me hold on. So if Trump deployed the National Guard to DC now, did that mean that Mike Johnson allowed it? Is that how that works? Because turnabout's fair play.
To dump some of the blame on Nancy Pelosi.
I definitely gave the number of 10,000 National Guardsmen. I think you should have 10,000 of the National Guard ready. They took that number, from what I understand, they gave it to the people at the Capitol, which is controlled by Pelosi, and I heard they rejected it because they didn't think it looked good.
Of course, that new part, also completely untrue. Just fabricated, whole cloth. Trump has continued to spread this lie, even recently on his fake Twitter platform, falsely claiming he recommended, offered.
See, that's all it takes. Just over and over and over and over and over. We failed. We don't want to admit that we failed. We don't want to admit that we're the baddies. That's why we always say the left are the fascists. And now we have to blame Nancy Pelosi because of our failed coup.
Thousands of troops, and Pelosi refused them. He will not stop repeating this, even now, 18 months later. Then, of course, there's the cable news echo chamber for Trump's pseudo-alibi.
Donald Trump authorized up to 20,000 National Guard soldiers to protect the Capitol. Donald Trump authorized the use of 20,000 National Guard troops. Donald Trump called up the National Guard 2 days prior. Don't forget, President Trump requested increased National Guard support in the days leading.
You know, if they weren't so ashamed of the coup failure and everybody needing to ask for pardons, they wouldn't have spun such a wide narrative off of the same sheet. Here's our talking points, and they all get emailed out at the same time. You saw the same thing happen with the Epstein files. Charlie Kirk says, I'm no longer interested in it. I'm going to trust the government, which is, you know, hilarious for him to say. But once they're coordinated, they can just create a literal false reality. And people will just believe it because they're hearing what they want to hear. That's why I do shit like this.
Up to January 6th.
Sean Hannity was still doing this as recently as last month. According to Media Matters, he pushed the lie hundreds of times in total, at least 43 episodes of his show, including when he asked Donald Trump's acting Secretary of Defense at the time, Chris Miller, and Chris Miller's Chief of Staff, Kash Patel, to confirm they heard Trump author.
Now, this is going to be real interesting, gang, because you're going to hear what he says on television, and then you're going to hear what he says under oath. Same thing happens with every fucking right-winger. They'll lie their ass off up and down, but the moment that they get in court, it's either the fifth or the truth actually comes out. Like, for example, like when Epstein said that he had to take the fifth when asked if he'd been around Trump and any underage children. Remember? He took the fifth.
Authorized the use of National Guard troops before the 6th.
Mr. Trump unequivocally authorized up to 20,000 National Guardsmen and women for us to utilize should the second part of the law, the requests come in. But those requests never did.
A penalty of perjury to the committee?
Oh, absolutely, Sean.
Chris Miller, absolutely, Sean. Now, there's no law against lying to Fox News viewers, and if there was, there would not have a network. But there is a law against lying under oath. So what story do you think Chris Miller, the guy who told Sean Hannity last month that Trump ordered the Guard to be deployed before the 6th to be ready, what he told the January 6th committee? Well, the committee has released the tape. We'll play it for you next.
Mr. Trump unequivocally authorized up to 20,000 National Guards men and women for us to utilize should the second part of the law, the requests, come in. But those requests never did, as you highlighted.
And remember that he put Kash Patel at the very top, like 2 weeks prior to his transition before Jan 6. And I called it out then. I was like, these are dictator moves. He's just removing everybody that's at the top and putting loyalists in. It's like you couldn't see this coming a mile fucking off. And then when all this evidence appears, like all the people that try to gaslight you, it's infuriating. But that's okay. Here's this testimony. Sorry about your narrative, MAGA.
Let me be very clear. Both of you said this under oath, under the threat of a penalty of perjury to the committee?
Oh, absolutely, Sean.
Under threat of oath. Perjury. Absolutely, Sean. Unequivocally. Not a lot of wiggle room in those statements. Since January 6th, Donald Trump and his allies, like Kash Patel, who apparently wears a custom Kash Patel lapel pin with a $sign on it, have repeated this utter lie over and over, that the ex-president authorized the National Guard to defend the Capitol from the mob in the days leading to it, and then he ordered them to go in. Well, now the January 6th committee has released definitive proof debunking it. This is testimony under oath. One of the very men you just heard spreading the lie.
Rewind it if you need to, gang.
With Sean Hannity on Fox News last month, Donald Trump's acting Secretary of Defense, Chris Miller.
I just want to be clear here that since then, in February of 2021, Mark Meadows said on Fox News that, quote, even in January, that was a given. As many as 10,000 National Guard troops were told to be on the ready by the Secretary of Defense. Is there any accuracy to that statement?
I'm not from my perspective. I was never given any direction or order or knew of any plans of that nature. So I was surprised by seeing that publicly, but I don't know the context or where it was. So, no, there was no. We obviously had plans for activating more folks, but that was not anything more than contingency planning. There was no official message.
We can't lie under oath, so the truth finally comes out. There it is, MAGA. Under oath, those guards were not authorized. And if they were authorized, Nancy Pelosi wouldn't have been the one in charge, okay? The fact of the matter is Trump wanted Jan 6 to go off. He fanned the flames, and then he made enough plausible deniability to be able to make his followers latch on to that, as opposed to realizing that they failed a fucking coup.
Traffic or anything of that nature regarding.
Just so we're clear, you did not have 10,000 troops to be on the ready for January 6th, prior to January 6th.
A non-military person probably could have some sort of weird interpretation, but no, to answer your question, no, that was not part of my plan or the Department of Defense's plan.
Lies, just lies. They just lie. Joining here now, Elliot Mistel, Justice Correspondent for The Nation, where he covers politics and.
Yeah, lies. That's all it is. It's just straight up lies. But there's the testimony. If there's any questions about that testimony, I'm sure that, they'll figure out some way to spin it or whatnot and say Chris Miller was part of the deep state or some other bullshit, just so they don't have to take the L. Well, we're quite used to that, aren't we, gang? It's fucking pathetic is what it is. But as long as we keep calling it out, we're going to keep busting up those narratives, aren't we? But in the meantime, until that time comes, oh yeah, great to see you. You take care of yourself. Good to see you. My buddy from Germany. In the meantime, let's get on with the business. That's right. It's time for Twisted History. Ow!
It is not heresy, and I will not recant.
Yeah! What do we got going on today? What are we going to learn about? What particular event in the wide world of past happenings? Well, I think that it's pretty, I'd say, relative to our time right now. I don't know if you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Smedley Butler or not. Now, Smedley Butler was an extremely decorated soldier. And Smedley Butler got asked to lead a fascist coup, the style that they were planning for Gen 6. It was called the business plot. There's a whole ton of information you can learn about the business plot. But today we're going to learn about it together.
Today's video. In 1933 and 1934, an alleged plot to overthrow the government of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, by Wall Street bankers
Delano, sir.
may have happened. While contemporary newspapers called it a gigantic hoax, others, including the House's Special Committee on Un-American Activities, found the allegations credible. You decide. During the campaign of 1932, FDR's promise of jobs for the unemployed frightened businessmen who feared he would turn their capitalist nation socialist and engage in what they viewed as reckless government spending. To add insult to injury, one of Roosevelt's first economic acts as president was to...
You ever notice the deficit hawks act like they care about spending, but then when the time comes that they can spend like drunken sailors, they go for it and do it with absolutely no remorse?
To abandon the gold standard in 1933. Conservatives were outraged. As Senator Henry D. Hatfield wrote, "This is despotism, this is tyranny, this is the annihilation of liberty. The ordinary American is thus reduced to the status of a robot. The president has not merely signed the death warrant of capitalism, but has ordained the mutilation of the Constitution unless the friends of liberty, regardless of party, band themselves together to regain their lost freedom." Some
Does that not sound familiar or what? Like, in every single one of those is that whole double speak thing where it's like, because you're giving people a chance to make an actual wage and benefits, that you're taking away their liberty. One thing that the rich have really learned how to do is take people who consider themselves to be temporarily embarrassed billionaires and give them flights of fancy that anything that actually they vote for that might be actually in their interest is completely un-American and non-patriotic. And they fucking eat it up decade after decade.
Joined together to form the American Liberty League with the intent of showing the value of encouraging people to work, encouraging people to get rich. Members included some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the country at the time, such as Irénée Pierre and Lamont DuPont, John W. Davis, former presidential candidates and lawyer to J.P. Morgan, Alfred Sloan of General Motors, and Al Smith, a prominent New York politician.
I didn't switch this one over too. Sorry, gang. Damn live TV. When you're editing two different accounts.
So, just before we get into it today, you just click... But has ordained the mutilation of the Constitution unless the friends of liberty, regardless of party, band themselves together to regain their lost freedom. Some joined together to form the American Liberty League with the intent of showing the value of encouraging people to work, encouraging people to get rich. Members included some of the wealthiest and most powerful people in the country at the time, such as Irénée Pierre and Lamont DuPont, John W. Davis, former presidential candidates,
the richest
and lawyers to J.P. Morgan, Alfred Sloan of General
sure
Motors, and Al Smith,
the
prominent New
rubes
York
get all
politician.
riled up about
According
something
to those
so
who
that they
believe there
can
was a
protect
plot,
their
several
wealth.
members of the League, fearful of the socialistic and communistic, in their mind, reforms FDR intended, they planned to overthrow his administration. The plotters included a DuPont, a former former presidential candidate, a former governor of New York, Wall Street bankers, and a director of Bethlehem Steel. Two members of this Wall Street putsch were Gerald Maguire, a well-connected bond salesman and commander of the Connecticut American Legion, and William Doyle, also a former American Legion commander. At this time in the US, in the midst of the Great Depression, fascism was not seen as an entirely bad thing by a number of Americans. In fact, one historian has noted the success of Huey Long, the popular and powerful governor of Louisiana, seemed evidence that fascism could come from within.
And the funniest thing about people consistently falling for the tricks of fascism is they always wrap it up in the drapes of like liberty and freedom. It's the most infuriating thing, because stupid people swear that they're right no matter what, and fascists tell them that they are right no matter what, until they can finally use them for their own political ends. And it just happens over and over and over.
With the acquiescence of the people. In fact, advocates of the right-wing style government believed they had a ready militia just waiting for them in the posts of the American Legion. As one Emily Marshall wrote in her...
Dude, those American Legions and those VFWs, like especially in my hometown, man, they might as well just be sleeper cells. If it wasn't dudes just sitting there by themselves, like drinking and commiserating with each other's military service, which is perfectly acceptable and encouraged, that's fine. But it's basically an armed sleeper cell waiting. I mean, I grew up with being around gun clubs, and those gun clubs were 100% conservative. Now, do you think that those were just because they wanted to protect their Second Amendment rights? No. They knew at the time ever come that they were going to use those to literally back up the fascism that they approve of, but not calling it that, because they're more concerned with quote-unquote commies, because communism has always been the general enemy of America. Now, I'm not a communist myself, but I know that anything that fascists don't like is instantly considered commie. I mean, it was Roy Cohn that got the Rosenbergs put to death.
The forgotten treason, the plot to overthrow FDR. The impoverished but well-trained veterans of the First World War were the ideal candidates for a fascist militia, and through the American Legion, they were already organized and uniformed with nearly 1 million members.
And the funny thing is that was the exact thinking of the black shirts and the brown shirts too, is we have these people who are already battle hardened and they're pissed off because their economic situation is nothing. Why not go ahead and harness their anger in order to form a private militia? And fascists always use a paramilitary force. That's why we have ICE now.
So this brings us to General Smedley Butler. Without a doubt, Butler was an American hero. Joining the Marines at the age of 16, he did a stint in Cuba in 1898 and was noted for outstanding heroism during the Boxer Rebellion, later added not 1 but 2 Medals of Honor, and pretty much continued to shine throughout his career until rising to the rank of Major General after a few decades of serving. No lapdog to the establishment, Butler frequently came afoul of the powers that be. For example, in 1932, he defended the bonus marches, a protest of 20,000 impoverished World War I veterans camped out in Washington.
The bonus army is definitely a piece of American history worth looking into, because when you have a whole lot of frustrated veterans, they're very, very, very easily whipped into a frenzy.
Washington, D.C., trying to obtain benefits. Butler was very popular with the veterans, and
basically they were promised a bonus for going to World War I by the government, and then when they came back alive, government was like, no, and they stayed inside of Congress and voted down right there, just in the same way they just did with the big beautiful bill in order to fuck everybody's lives over. They did the exact same with the bonus army and their pay. They were like, no, like they went and fought for us and whatnot, but we're done with them. See, we're rich, they're poor, we don't have to give them shit. If they don't like it, they can fuck off. And then had the encampments bulldozed. But maybe we'll do a video on the bonus army.
Was frequently asked to speak to veterans groups. In an address to a conversation of the American Legion in 1931, Butler stated, "I spent 33 years being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer for capitalism, purifying Nicaragua for the international banking house. In 1909 to 1912, Mexico for American oil interests in 1916, the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916, Haiti and Cuba for the National City Boys. I helped in the rape of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street." Butler remained an advocate for soldiers' rights and continued to lecture against war profiteering and his fear that fascism was rising in the United States. This all brings us to the business plot itself. Most of the record of the plot comes from General Butler's testimony before the House's Special Committee, McCormack-Dickstein Committee. He claims that in 1933 he was approached by Doyle and Maguire under the guise of helping reform the American Legion. The beginning of the plot required Butler to plant 200 to 300 regular legionnaires in the audience at the annual convention, encourage them to make a fuss, and then emerge and make a speech written for him by Doyle and Maguire. When asked where the money to transport the soldiers to Chicago would come from, Butler says Maguire told him, "Oh, we have friends that include Grayson Murphy." Butler demurred, but was later approached by Robert Clark, heir to the Singer sewing machine fortune, who explained that the speech was important to their plan to return America to the gold standard. He stated, "I do not want to lose my fortune. I am willing to spend half to save the other half. If you go out and make this speech in Chicago, I am certain that they will adopt the resolution, and that will be one step towards the return to gold." Butler refused to give the speech. After the convention in November 1933, Maguire approached Butler again, this time to lead a great big super organization to maintain the democracy, which he described later as a French organization of super soldiers. Maguire reportedly told Butler the soldiers would support the president by seeing that he doesn't change the method of financing the government. The plot, according to Butler, also involved the installation of an assistant president, a secretary of general affairs, to help the overworked and disabled FDR, about whom, to quote, "Everybody can tell that the president's health is failing, and the dumb American people will fall for it in a second."
Does that sound a lot like a lot of the smears that they put against Joe Biden? Now, don't get me wrong, he wasn't as sharp as he could be, but also the fucking fascists that we're dealing with right now, he gets to be as dumb as he wants, and then they just sane wash it. And then if you point it out, you could just get told that you have a derangement syndrome. No, I have the ability to recognize when somebody is not all there. Trust me. I think that millions of other people do too. Just because you can't happen to see a fault doesn't mean the rest of the world's blind.
Butler never joined the plot, but spoke with his friend and Philadelphia Record reporter Paul Cumley French about it. French investigated in September 1934 and testified that when asked, Maguire told him that "we need a fascist government in this country. The only men who have the patriotism to do it are the soldiers, and Smedley Butler is the ideal leader. He could organize 1 million men overnight." French corroborated the remainder of Butler's story. Somehow Congress got wind of the plot and called...
You know, I think that one of the reasons that this regime decided to completely paint everybody else as fascists is because they know just how unpopular it is with the regular public. But then once they finally get power, they just rip the masks, smooth the fuck off, and they're just like, yeah, fascism. That's what we do. It's what we like. It's what we dig. If you don't like it, get up against the wall. And it's absolutely infuriating to know that there's so many people who they're so entrenched in their bigoted beliefs that the idea of critical thinking, that they might be being used as pawns in a larger game, just doesn't cross to them because they're so worried about their their current grievances. But also, don't get me wrong, economic factors are a thing too. And I mean, they already just showed right there. You know, they said, I'm willing to spend, what was it, twice my money to keep half of it. I mean, just because the idea that workers might actually be getting decent wages and benefits just scares the ever-living shit out of the fat cats.
General Butler and French to testify in November 1934. After the plot was revealed, the knives came out, and in New York, the story was that it was all just a big misunderstanding. In fact, the mayor, Fiorello LaGuardia, spoke with the Associated Press on November 22nd, 1934, which reported, Mayor LaGuardia of New York laughingly described today the charges of General Smedley D. Butler that New York brokers suggested that he lead an army of 500,000 ex-servicemen on Washington as a cocktail putsch. The mayor indicated he believed that someone...
They basically wanted their own version of the March on Rome that Mussolini did, which, by the way, was a complete farce, aside from the people that they like terrorized, you know, on their way to Rome. But once they got to Rome, it was just a show. And just because Mussolini was able to convince the king that it was the fascists that would protect him against the socialists, because he used the phrase, "We'll be free when the last king is strangled by the entrails of the last priest," then instantly he was like, oh, okay, well, we can't have that shit. And Mussolini's like, yeah, we're all about you imperialists. And he's like, okay, you black shirts can go ahead and, yeah, you can have free reign. And that's exactly what happened here, is they wanted to form their own little fascist army to march on Washington, D.C. The Fash Cant original, every time.
A party had suggested the idea to the ex-Marine as a joke. That said, after extensive investigation, a congressional committee investigating the matter concluded, in the last few weeks of the committee's official life, it received evidence showing that certain persons had made an attempt to establish a fascist organization in this country. There is no question that these attempts were discussed, were planned, and might have been placed in execution when and if the financial backers deemed it expedient. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, why not go check out my new channel, Business Blaze. I'm going to link to a video.
And there you have it. We had the rich trying to take advantage of a soldier who they knew that the people that he led respected and would be able to lead them in a fascist coup. And I think that the idea of people who are going to be at all disloyal has been already vetted through. I mean, as far as we're concerned, like, they'd be asking Mike Flynn to lead that, and he'd be like, well, fuck yeah, I'll do it. Especially I'll do it in the name of the Lord, because one thing they absolutely love doing is justifying their heinous deeds with religion. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today on ViperTV Live. It's been so cool. I'm just glad that, we get to talk about some things that might make our current situation that we're dealing with just a little more palatable, because we know that the truth is out there and that their lies can always be countered by truth. So just make sure that you grab your phone, make sure that you spread the word, because I'm only one microphone, but liberty depends on all of us. I think that it's not as bleak as we think, because though there's a lot of people who very, very happily support fascism, there's a lot more people that don't. And the poll numbers are cratering. And of course we are to expect this, because the moment that the lie no longer works, then comes the boot. Stay strong, find your people. We'll get through it, I promise. Until then, later skaters. Ow! Go to skipfriesjr.net for podcasts.
Fresh record player that, I could just spin records all the time.
I run into the bathroom and I'm covered in blood. Like I had put my tooth through my bottom lip.
For music. For gaming and pro-liberty game rants. That's skipfriesjr.net.